13 most haunted churches in the world. Adams Grove Presbyterian Church, Alabama. Adams Grove Presbyterian Church, which was built in 1853, is a historic Greek Revival-style church. This style of architecture was quite popular during the 1800s. In 1974, the church's last congregation was held. In 1986, it was placed on the National Register of Historic Places. What most people don't know about Adams Grove Presbyterian Church and its attached cemetery is that it's one of Alabama's most haunted locations. Ever since its last congregation, strange occurrences have been reported by the residents of Dallas County. Over the years, paranormal investigators have also witnessed strange things happening. Several people have reported seeing a shadowy man with fiery red eyes in both the church and the cemetery, which was established 5 years before the church was built. Many people have also reported seeing the ghost of a Confederate soldier ordering trespassers off the property if they enter the cemetery. Acqua Episcopal Church, Virginia. Acqua Episcopal Church is a beautiful place of worship in Stafford, Virginia. Not unlike many of the state's historic spots, it has 200 years of history that many consider haunted. The early years of the church were marked with tragedy. In the mid-18th century, a woman was hiding from a gang of highwaymen within the church's walls and was killed. Even more upsetting was the fact that her body was not discovered until years later, when the church reopened after the Revolutionary War. No one knows exactly the details of the murder, yet there have been several claims of paranormal activity since. City Methodist Church, Indiana. The City Methodist Church was first built in Gary in 1926 for an astronomical final cost of over $1 million, which would translate to over $9 million in today's money. By the mid-1970s, the town's population had dwindled significantly and the church's congregation had dropped to the low hundreds. Despite renting out some of the space to a local university, the upkeep of the grand church soon became too much for the owners to handle, and by 1975, the church was closed for good, and the grounds quickly fell victim to despair and vandalism. The church has remained abandoned to this day, but the neglect has turned the imposing Gothic chapel into a haunting piece of urban ruin. Multiple films have used the crumbling church as a backdrop, including Nightmare on Elm Street, and many locals say that it's one haunted place they will never visit. Egg Hill Church, Pennsylvania. If you take a moment to Google Egg Hill Church, you'll be almost immediately regaled with a story of gruesome murders. The urban legend, which varies according to which source you read, states that a mad pastor murdered his entire congregation in the mid-1800s. However, according to Dick Decker, the township chairman, says the ghost stories about the church are a result of some delusional person's imagination and are not fact. However, most people say this is because he doesn't want to believe such horrific things happened in his own town. Regardless of what you think happened in this eerie and somewhat odd place, Egg Hill Church provides as many good vibes to the people who appreciate history as it does creepy ones to the paranormal investigators. Ardor Church, France. In central France, a few miles from Limoges, lies a ghost town called Ardor-sur-Glane. Abandoned and nothing but empty houses and tram lines exist here. Not long after the invasion of Normandy during World War II, as German forces rushed to meet the Allied advance, a regiment of the 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich, in other words, a group of Nazis, surrounded the village of Ardor-sur-Glane. The men of the village were quickly rounded up, then herded into a variety of surrounding barns and garages as the women and children were combined to a local church. A gas bomb was placed in the church and ignited. When the resulting fire and smoke failed to suffocate the women and children inside, the SS Panzers mowed them down with machine guns. And because of this, the church is thought to be one of the most haunted in France. Our Lady of Guadalupe Church, New Orleans. At this point, it may not come as much of a surprise to find that death by yellow fever in New Orleans went hand in hand through 23 major epidemics. The old mortuary church was desperately needed. In the midst of any one onslaught of the disease, a fevered panic grew at the thought of depositing all of the bodies. There was simply not enough space. Bodies lined the streets, stacked high and wide, so wide that many found it difficult to cut through the sidewalks at all. Spread of the disease was attributed to closed spaces within the city and a lack of cleanliness. Whatever the reason, there was simply no cure, and the dead continued to pile up, and that is why this church is thought to be one of the most haunted in America. San Martin de Tours Church, Spain. The imposing church of San Martin de Tours still stands with frescoes still visible after all the devastation that happened many years ago. Locals will point out features like the rubble that once was the town hall, the doctor's surgery, and the shops where the families would trade, buy meals and farm equipment and goods. Locals often say we get a lot of visitors, even ghost hunters who have equipment that say record voices like cries of babies. There are many stories we do know are true and well recorded, like the dozens of bodies found because of the American and British fighters who killed here. This history was only 80 years ago, although, of course, the church history and buildings are much older. St. Botolph's Church, England. This church in Skidbrook is among the most haunted spots in Lincolnshire and is a centre for unexplained paranormal activity. The isolated abandoned church has had many dealings with satanist groups over the past few decades. Because of this, Skidbrook has been the subject of much publicity due to the reports of paranormal activity at the church. Several ghost hunters have reported unusual goings-on at the building, and the church was nicknamed the Demon Church after it became popular with the satanist groups of 1970s and 1980s. Visitors have reported seeing a ghostly monk on site, seeing odd lights and hearing sounds of storms in calm weather, and hearing strange, unexplained noises at night. St. Andrew's, Staten Island, New York. This centuries-old church was once used as a makeshift Revolutionary War hospital. The Church of St. Andrew is an Episcopal church found in the Staten Island's Richmond town. Its congregation was formed in 1708 and was the first church built between 1712 and 1713. The building had been badly damaged sometime around 1867, and a new one was constructed in Gothic style in 1872. A small cemetery can be found in the churchyard, and in the back there is also a pet cemetery. Visitors to the church have reported some strange phenomena, including disembodied footsteps and voices, an organ that plays by itself, pictures which fall off the wall for no reason, and a feeling of being watched. Some say that they have even seen ghosts in the building. St. Mark's Episcopal Church, Wyoming. St. Mark's Episcopal Church, Cheyenne's Episcopal congregation, first held services in a small frame church in 1868. However, by 1886, the congregation, made up of a number of cattle barons and large ranches, had begun to outgrow the small building, and plans were made to construct a new one. Opened in 1888, it was still not entirely complete, as the bell tower was not done and was simply capped off. It would be years before the bell tower was finally completed in 1924. Skilled in old world masonry, 2 Swedish men were hired to complete the tower. However, when it was 40 feet high, the 2 masons simply disappeared. When the new workers were hired, they immediately began to complain of hearing strange tappings, the sounds of hammering and whispers coming from the very walls of the tower. Years later, a man came forward explaining that the original masons were working on the tower when one of them slipped and fell to his death. The other one panicked that he would be deported and entombed the man's remains into the tower wall. St. Mary the Virgin, England. There are a few odd things about this ancient little church, the most significant being that it was supposedly built facing the wrong way. You see, churches are traditionally oriented to face the east, the direction from which the sun rises, which in the Christian religion is associated with the location of heaven and the return of the Messiah. Churches are positioned with the altar facing east so that people will pray in that holy direction. Some have claimed that because St. Mary the Virgin faces away from God, it thus opens its doors to hell. Indeed, the church has a long history of reported hauntings and supposed satanic rituals. And it's because of this it's thought to be one of the most haunted churches in the world. St. Nicholas Church, England. Puckley is a village in Kent, England. While it is relatively small, it is classified as the most haunted village in Britain, with at least 12 recorded hauntings. There have been many tragic deaths in the village. The odd concentration may be due to the location of the village in terms of magnetism in the ground. Paranormal activity is believed to flourish in areas of strong geological magnetism. One of the many hauntings that occupy the church is the Red Lady, a member of the Daring family, said to be buried in 7 lead coffins within an oak coffin and placed in the crypt in St. Nicholas's Church. The Red Lady was said to be buried with a red rose in her coffin, hence the name the Red Lady. She is said to be searching for the grave of her stillborn child. St. Pauls Chapel, New York. Just up the street from a burial place of Alexander Hamilton, you'll find St. Paul's Chapel, the oldest standing church in New York City. George Washington prayed here at the day of his inauguration, and the church served as a port in the storm during the tragic events of September 11th, 2001. Despite the enormous devastation that day, St. Paul's emerged without so much as a broken window. But St. Paul's churchyard is home to a ghost of one George Frederick Cook, an English actor who got in over his head living a high life in New York City in 1810. So much so that he allegedly, lost it. Since around the time of the church's monument's installment in 1821, visitors have reported a ghastly sight of a headless man roaming the churchyard, looking for something, presumably his head.